All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're diving headfirst into a topic that's about as loaded as a Thanksgiving turkey. We're talking about socialism.
Yeah, you can't really escape it these days, can you? It's everywhere you turn, the news, social media, even casual conversation.
It's become a bit of a buzzword, hasn't it? And like most buzzwords, I think it's safe to say it's often used with, let's just say, varying degrees of understanding.
It's one of those things people throw around, but when you really press for specifics, it's like, well, everyone shares everything.
Exactly. So to cut through the noise and get to the heart of what socialism really means, we're taking a deep dive into a country where it's been front and center for decades, Brazil.
And to make things even more interesting, we're going hyper-local, focusing on a region within Brazil that's got a particularly complex relationship with socialism, the Northeast. It's a region that's been grappling with persistent poverty despite decades of social programs aimed at uplifting communities.
You talk about a paradox, right? Good intentions, big spending. But the needle hasn't really moved on poverty. So, before we unpack that whole conundrum, let's back up a bit for those who might be thinking, wait, socialism, isn't that just like free stuff?
Yeah, it's a lot more nuanced than that, that's for sure.
So give us the Spark Notes version. When we say socialism, what are we actually talking about?
Well, at its core, think of it as a system that strives for economic equality. The idea is that resources should be shared and distributed more fairly so that everyone has a chance to thrive, not just a privileged few.
So it's about leveling the playing field, making sure everyone has access to basic necessities, education, healthcare, that kind of thing. It's pretty good in theory, right? Who would want that?
Right, the ideals are certainly appealing, but as with most things in life, the devil's in the details. Because when you start trying to translate those ideals into real-world policies, that's where things get tricky.
And that's where those unintended consequences come into play, right?
Exactly. And that's precisely what we're going to be exploring today, how a concept designed to combat poverty can sometimes end up intertwined with the very problem it's trying to solve. It's like trying to untangle a giant knot, only to realize you might actually be tightening it instead.
So how do you even begin to unravel that?
Why?
Where do we start with this whole socialism poverty paradox?
Well, I think the first step is understanding the concept of dependency.
Dependency, hit me with it. What does that look like in the context of social programs and poverty?
Imagine a scenario where the very systems designed to support people end up inadvertently fostering a reliance on those systems, even discouraging self-sufficiency.
So instead of a helping hand, it becomes a crutch, preventing people from reaching their full potential.
It's a complex issue, and it plays out in different ways.
Well, let's break it down then. Give us the lowdown on how this dependency thing actually plays out in the real world. What are the mechanisms at work here?
Well, for starters, think about the incentives involved. If someone is receiving enough aid to get by, even if it's just barely enough, they might be less motivated to seek out work or opportunities for advancement, especially if those opportunities are scarce or don't seem to offer a significant improvement in their standard of living.
So it's like, why risk putting in the effort for a minimal gain, right?
Exactly. And it's not just about individual motivation either. There is a broader economic impact to consider. When a significant portion of the population relies heavily on government assistance, it can put a strain on the national budget, limiting the resources available for other crucial investments.
So it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
In a way, yes. The money that could be used for things like education, infrastructure, or fostering entrepreneurship ends up being funneled into maintaining the status quo, essentially trapping people in a cycle of dependence.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? These social programs, while well-intentioned, can sometimes have unintended consequences that actually exacerbate the very problems they aim to address. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
That's a pretty apt analogy, but remember, it's not just about the economics of it all. There's a human element to this equation that often gets overlooked.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when people come to rely on these programs for extended periods, it can create a sense of learned helplessness. They might start to believe that they're incapable of creating a better life for themselves, that they're stuck in a system that doesn't offer them any real agency. And that, my friend, is where the real damage is done. It's one thing to struggle financially, but it's another thing entirely to lose hope, to feel like you're trapped in a system that doesn't value your potential or your contributions.
It's like being told, this is as good as it gets for you. And having that message reinforced day after day, year after year, it's enough to crush anyone's spirit.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations to acknowledge both the potential benefits and the potential pitfalls of social programs. Because at the end of the day, our goal should be to create a society where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential, not one that inadvertently keeps them tethered to a system of dependence. We need to find a way to balance compassion with empowerment, to provide a safety net without creating a sense of complacency. It's a delicate dance, but it's a dance we have to get right if we want to build a more just and equitable world.
So we've painted a pretty bleak picture so far, haven't we? But I think it's important to remember that this isn't about demonizing social programs or the people who rely on them.
Absolutely not. It's about recognizing the complexities and having honest conversations about how we can create systems that truly empower people rather than trapping them in a cycle of dependence.
Easier said than done, right? So let's put on our problem-solving hats for a minute. What are some potential solutions here? How do we shift from a culture of dependency to a culture of empowerment?
Well, I think education is a good place to start. Investing in quality education and vocational training can equip people with the skills and knowledge they need to compete in today's job market and create a better future for themselves.
It's about giving people the tools to fish, not just handing them a fish today, right?
Exactly. But it's not just about acquiring specific skills, it's about fostering a mindset of lifelong learning, of adaptability and resilience. Because let's face it, the world is changing faster than ever, and the jobs of tomorrow might not even exist yet. We need to prepare people not just for specific careers, but for a future where adaptability is key.
It's about being able to roll with the punches and create your own opportunities, even when the going gets tough.
Precisely. And that's where entrepreneurship comes in. Fostering a culture that encourages and supports small business creation can be a game changer. Not only does it create jobs and boost the economy, but it also empowers individuals to take ownership of their livelihoods and build something from the ground up.
It's about that sense of agency we were talking about earlier, right? Well,
Exactly. It's about giving people the opportunity to be their own bosses, to control their destinies, and to contribute to society in a meaningful way.
but starting a business is no walk in the park, is it? I mean, it takes resources, support, and a whole lot of guts. How do we make sure aspiring entrepreneurs, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, have the support they need to succeed?
That's where targeted policies and programs come in. We need to make sure that access to capital, mentorship, and business development resources are readily available to everyone, regardless of their background or zip code.
So it's about creating a level playing field for entrepreneurship, not just assuming that everyone starts with the same advantages.
Exactly. And it's not just about financial resources either. It's about creating a supportive ecosystem where aspiring entrepreneurs have access to mentors, role models, and networks that can guide them on their journey. Because let's be honest, starting a business can be incredibly isolating, especially if you don't come from a family of entrepreneurs.
It's like trying to navigate a maze in the dark. You need someone who knows the way to shine a light and guide you.
Precisely. And that's why I believe that mentorship is so crucial, especially for young people who might not otherwise have exposure to the world of business or entrepreneurship.
Because sometimes all it takes is seeing someone who looks like you, who comes from a similar background as you, achieving success to make you believe that it's possible for you too.
Absolutely. Representation matters. And it's not just about inspiration either. It's about having someone who understands your challenges, who can offer practical advice, and who can connect you with the right people and resources. It's about building a community of support.
Speaking of community, I think it's important to acknowledge the role that communities play in fostering a culture of empowerment. It's not just about individual initiative, right? It's about having a strong support system in place.
Absolutely. Strong communities are the backbone of any thriving society. They provide a sense of belonging, purpose, and mutual support. And they can play a vital role in breaking down those cycles of poverty and dependence that we've been talking about.
So how do we strengthen communities that might have been weakened by decades of poverty and reliance on government assistance?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a complex issue with no easy answers. But I think it starts with investing in those communities, not just financially, but also socially.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, it could mean providing funding for community centers, parks, and recreational facilities. It could mean supporting local businesses and organizations that are working to improve the lives of residents. It could mean investing in community policing initiatives that build trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve.
So it's about creating spaces and opportunities for people to come together, to connect with one another, and to build a sense of shared ownership over their community.
Exactly. It's about fostering a sense of pride, of belonging, and of collective efficacy.
Because when people feel connected to their community and invested in its well-being, they're more likely to take ownership of the challenges it faces and to work together to find solutions.
Absolutely. And that's where the real magic happens, when people come together with a shared purpose and a belief in their collective ability to create positive change.
It's about shifting from a mindset of what's in it for me to what can we achieve together.
Now you're talking. That's the spirit of true progress, wouldn't you say?
So it really is about fostering that sense of shared responsibility, right? Like we're all in this together and we all have a role to play in creating a more just and equitable society.
100%. It's not about waiting for someone else to swoop in and fix things. It's about recognizing that real change starts at the grassroots level, with individuals and communities coming together to create a better future for themselves and for generations to come.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about the ideals of socialism, the complexities of social programs, the dangers of dependency, and the power of education, entrepreneurship, and community empowerment.
Quite the journey.
It really has been. But if there's one thing I want our listeners to take away from all of this, it's that there's no one-size-fits-all solution, no magic wand we can wave to instantly eradicate poverty or inequality.
It's an ongoing process, a constant balancing act, and it requires us to be both compassionate and clear-eyed about the challenges we face.
We have to be willing to have those difficult conversations, to challenge our assumptions, and to be open to new ideas and approaches. Because if we're not constantly learning, adapting, and striving to do better, then we're not really moving forward, are we?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So, to our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, challenged your perspectives, and maybe even inspired you to get a little more involved in your own communities.
Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together.
And that's a wrap on another deep dive. We hope you'll join us next time for another exploration into the complex and fascinating forces shaping our world. Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay hopeful.